York. Drop where you're coming from in the chat so we can see where we have our attendees tuning in from. Thank you so much for participating in this conversation, and we'll get started shortly as people filter in. Binghamton, New York. Nice to represent a little bit more upstate. I'm in the Bronx. Oh, we got Hamilton, New York. I went to college by there. Brooklyn in the house. And Manhattan. Great. Great. We have a great mixture of individuals all across the state, and one of our presenters here today is from California, so we'll be getting a very well-rounded perspective about this issue. Oh, we have New Jersey. Nice to see our neighboring state here. Western New York. Nice to meet you. Welcome. All right, we got a good group here. Nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Amanda Rodriguez. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the policy coordinators here at NASW New York. Gideon, please introduce yourself as well.
Hi, y'all. I'm Gideon Mosse. I'm the other policy coordinator here at NASW New York. Thank you guys so much for coming today.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's Policy Town Hall about AI and social work, an event brought to you by NASW New York CARES Social Work Month series. The goal of this town hall is to bring social workers and allies together to talk about the fast-paced changes that have occurred in the social work profession with the takeover by AI. We hope that you engage with our presenters and ask them questions. There'll be plenty of time for questions and discussion. And we will host time at the end of the event for more discussion around everybody to discuss any ethical or technical opinions when it comes to this topic. To ensure a smooth experience, we kindly ask that everyone remain muted while the presenter or guests are speaking. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to submit them via the chat, or if the presenter invites you to unmute, you may ask your question then. A staff member will be monitoring the chat throughout the event and will make sure any questions are addressed. We also ask that all attendees respect the NASW anti-harassment policy, which will be shared shortly with all of you in the chat. Our goal tonight is to maintain an accountable and respectful environment for everyone and to provide information and resources to those who are seeking it. Additionally, we will be sending any materials and resources discussed today, as well as info on upcoming opportunities with the chapter to your email by no later than the end of the week. Thank you all once again for being here tonight, and we look forward to a productive and respectful conversation. So, firstly, we'll start with a presentation from ourselves, the policy team, before we move on to our next amazing presenters that we have tonight. Are you all able to see my screen? Perfect. So this is a photo of Dr. Anthony Estreet, our CEO of the National NASW, speaking at our Capital Action Day in Albany that was held on February 10th. We're going to discuss a little bit briefly today how policy helps defend social work from unethical AI use and how collective advocacy can help change outcomes in our state. So first, we always want to go over how policy works at NASW to gain more clarity about how decisions are made and exactly the process that is gone through to put any priorities on our legislative agenda list. So firstly, NASW, the New York chapter specifically, is made aware of any issue that affects New York social workers or the communities we serve, and that can be submitted to us via email, or we can receive a phone call, or we can meet somebody out at an event and learn about an issue that affects the social work population. And any individual or public official or credible news release that is sharing this information could be something that we've received this information from. For this issue, for this issue particularly, we were reached out to by the senator's office Senator Kristen Gonzalez, who made us aware of the bill that they proposed. And we also were aware of legislation that was actually passed into law in other states, such as Illinois. And so this has been an issue that federally NASW has been looking at. Once our staff is made aware of the support requests, then information is forwarded to the board of directors and to our advocacy committees. The staff is responsible to provide any relevant information or context to help support a decision, and then it is decided if the chapter will move forward and look more closely into the particular request. And so in this committee, the Advocacy and Government Relations Committee is typically the advocacy arm that deals with our legislative agenda. They are comprised of social workers from all different aspects of the field, and they actually vote on what we will support. The Political Action through Candidate Election Committee, they endorse candidates through the political arm. And so that can go hand in hand with our advocacy as elected officials support our legislative agenda and help move it along. And of course, all policy must follow the NASW Code of Ethics, and we use that as our governing source as we decide the legislative agenda and any topics that we will endorse, support, or bring awareness to. Go ahead, Gideon.
So today we will be speaking about S8484 Gonzalez and A9106 Simon, which is the Oversight of Technology and Mental Health Care Act. Um, so this New York bill restricts the use of AI therapy and psychotherapy services. It prohibits AI from making independent treatment decisions, directly communicating with clients, or detecting emotions without licensed professional oversight. Violations carry civil penalties of up to $50,000. The bill is currently in committee. There are obviously a few facts here, but to get into them, the AI restrictions, one of the AI restrictions is it prohibits AI from making independent therapeutic decisions, directly communicating with clients, or generating treatment plans without licensed professional review, which is needed especially from social workers. Emotion detection ban. AI may not be used to detect or assess a client's emotions or mental states. Confidentiality. All client records and communications must remain private and protected. And then penalties, violations carry civil penalties of up to $50,000 per violation. So key to this bill in general is that we keep this therapy in social workers' hands. Speaking personally, I see ads on the subway for things like friend.com, which is a AI bot that you can talk to as a therapist. We are hoping to stray from that as much as possible, given that social work is so needed, especially in a mental health crisis, and it is so key to keep our regulations and our and the civil rights of people to social workers. That confidentiality is key.
Just to talk a little bit about who is leading this charge in the New York arena, we have one of our presenters today, which will join us shortly, Senator Kristen Gonzalez. She is the chair of the Internet and Technology Committee and the Elections Committee in the New York State Senate, and she represents District 59. So this is her speaking at our press conference at Capitol Action Day here. And we also have the sponsor in the assembly, Assemblymember Joanne Simon. She is the chair of the Mental Health Committee, and she represents AD 52, which represents Brooklyn. So we have two very strong sponsors in both houses. So we're very lucky to have these champions. I'm going to press play on a quick video here to show you Senator Kristen Gonzalez speaking. Let me just ensure that I have my sound shared.
Are as qualified to do the work that you have studied and practiced years for than you all. And that is not right. Shame. I am someone who has benefited from therapy. I am a representative who has seen firsthand social workers on the front lines through the pandemic, through the hardest moments, through the darkest days for some of our most marginalized constituents. And it is a
So we see how passionate Senator Kristen Gonzalez is around this issue. She is leading this charge because she truly believes that therapy should lie in the hands of the professionals who go through a master's program. hours and hours of practicum and supervision. This is not something to take lightly, and we appreciate that she truly understands that and is advocating to keep it in the hands of the professionals.
So to discuss the background and the issue a bit when it comes to this bill, I have a couple of facts here. There's currently no law preventing an AI from claiming to be a licensed therapist and providing therapy accordingly. And that is a gap that this bill directly addresses. It is so key that laws like that are instated, especially when AI technologies are progressing at the rate they are. AI companion products like Friend.com that I talked about earlier have exploded in popularity in general. And this is raising a serious concern on what the regulations are for said products. Regulation is needed. It is highly important. I mean, you all know, you've been trained on this. Code of ethics is key. And so we are hoping to keep that in place. Lawsuits and reports have alleged that AI services from companies like Character AI, OpenAI, and Meta encourage delusions throughout their user base. That is obviously of the highest importance, especially when we are in such a intense mental health crisis right now. In 2025, there have been multiple cases of children committing suicide because of AI bots, and that is obviously something that must be addressed in general. ChatGPT is in multiple cases surrounding these issues that Spur, let alone other AI, let alone other AI companies. Nearly 75% of US teens have used an AI companion, and that number continues to grow, which is obviously something that spurs when new technology is out, but regulation is key when it comes to keeping these AI bots from harming our kids and our children. Um, and this is not something new. States are already beginning to regulate AI therapy and companion tools. It's worked in multiple places, including Illinois, which the bill we're discussing today closely mimics. This bill in Illinois passed unanimously and has already had positive effects. So there are hundreds of issues on why we should be regulating and why AI needs to be AI needs to be regulated. Legislation is simply just key, and in order to pursue that, advocacy is key. Obviously, there are plenty of lobbyists, especially in New York State, that are lobbying for these AI companies. But as we know, as social workers, it is so important that we make sure to it is highly important that we make sure that we can advocate against that, that we can advocate against just the money and make sure that social workers can keep their jobs, one, and two, keep our citizens safe with therapy.
Just to go over quickly what some progress that we've made so far, there are co-sponsors in the Senate that include Senator Julia Salazar, the chair of the Committee on Crime Victims and Crime and Correction. So there does need to be some more sponsors in the Senate when it comes to this bill. There's some more advocacy needed. It was just introduced at the beginning of this session, so it is a fairly new bill. Co-sponsors in the Assembly, we have a little bit more of well-rounded support in that House. So we have Assemblymember Phil Steck, which is a notable co-sponsor. He's chair of the Committee on Alcoholism and Substance Abuse, and we have seven additional more co-sponsors on the Assembly side. The bill was voted as a legislative priority for the 2026 Capital Action Day by the NASW New York AGR Committee, which we welcome you to join. And they had some great feedback when it came to going to the different legislative offices and discussing this bill. And so we look forward to more of a fruitful conversation and hearing what you all have to say today. And so we want to go through how to get involved. So we gave you some information. We're going to hear from our other speakers shortly. And so we'll wrap this up. But we do want you to call your own legislators, and we'll drop a link in the chat that can help you identify who your own elected officials are when it comes to the state Senate and Assembly. So call your state senator, call your assembly member for your district, let them know if you have an opinion on social work in AI, let them know how it affects your practice, your clients, and any point of views that you may have. We encourage you to submit an op-ed, or if there's an opportunity to testify, to do so. We will submit a link to our current newsletter in our chat below that you can submit an op-ed for that will really support our advocacy. And join AGR. We really need more change makers and decision makers at our chapter. And we look forward to anyone who's very passionate about this topic to lead any projects when it comes to this and just, give some more feedback from us because it really helps to have members engaged in this work because we are member led and we pride ourselves on that. And so we hope to have more members engaged in this conversation and advocacy. And lastly, before we turn it over to the senator, if she's in the room, we'll just drop an Act Now link in the chat, and that is to advocate for S84A4 that we talked about today. And we hope that if you do complete it, drop a fire emoji or any emoji in the chat to invite your colleagues to do the same. We hope to have as much feedback in the legislature as possible and for these elected officials to just know where social workers stand on this issue. We know that you all do your jobs very well and you pride yourselves in that. And so letting your elected officials know what you think about on this topic is very beneficial to the state. Okay, great. So I will spotlight Kristen Gonzalez. Welcome, Senator.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much for having me. I am up in Albany right now for the legislative session, so appreciate the time, and it was great because this is virtual, so hopping on in between meetings. I think you all did an incredible job of explaining the bill, of explaining the issue area. I'm happy to talk a little bit about why I introduced the bill, and also, if there's some questions that folks have, happy to answer them, and we'll definitely defer to the moderators here on if you want like a Q&A and how to moderate that. But very briefly, for those who I may be meeting for the first time, my name is Kristen. I am a three-borough state senator, so I represent Western Queens, Northern Brooklyn, and the east side of Manhattan. I have been in office now for 4 years. For those 4 years, I have chaired the Internet Technology Committee. I also chair elections, but I myself am a former tech worker, so this issue area is really exciting to me as someone who's worked in the space and is now seeing new technologies rapidly develop. I introduced this bill as part of a broader package of legislation around the use of artificial intelligence, specifically large language models and chatbots. I think we can all agree that over the last few years, we have seen so many documented cases of how interactions and intimate relationships formed between users and LLMs has resulted in serious harm, whether it is minors and again, a bit of a trigger warning here, committing suicide with the assist of ChatGPT, encouraging them to keep their thoughts private, to not seek help. We actually, even in the last week, saw in Canada a lawsuit brought forward about the use of ChatGPT in planning a school shooting by a young woman. We've seen AI psychosis be on the rise and cases of folks who have gotten harmed in trying to go meet a companion that does not exist. And we've just seen a number of other cases of hallucinations or just general bad advice that comes from LLMs. And we know why this is the case. The case is that LLMs were never built with any specific use in mind. They are and again, I worked in tech, but I was someone who came from a non-technical background. So I worked as a product manager on a large data platform, but my degree is in political science. So to just kind of like, for those of you who like me are not technical in the room, these tools are essentially trained on on the largest amount of data we've ever seen a tool trained on in modern history. And that data basically is just taking this large net on the web, on the World Wide Web, right? Casting a very large net, taking it in, consuming it to create these large language models or these chatbots that we like ChatGPT. And when those models are trained, they are also given a set of like guidance and directives from a lot of these companies. And the guidance that they're given is in pulling from whatever data they're trained on. So we know again, biased data is in there, incorrect data is in there, misinformation in there is in there because there's no human way to actually now vet 100% of the training data that went into these models, and there is no technical way to untrain these models, right? these these models are now asked to be as sycophantic, as complementary as possible so that they create a positive user experience that makes people return customers. It is part of the business model. And because they're trained in such a large amount of data, they're also not trained for any specific purpose. Think of it as a jack of all trades. They're not meant to be therapists. They're not meant to be intimate partners. They're not meant to be really anything. They are just these generalist tools. So when you try to then shoehorn these tools into a specific use case, you have some serious problems because when you are having a conversation with a large language model, there is no technologically possible way to tell why it's giving you the output it's giving you. That's the intelligence part that we don't quite know. So when you are getting advice from an LLM, you can't necessarily pinpoint what website it came from, whether or not it's a credible source or not. And that explainability piece means it's really hard and actually impossible in this moment to have an LLM that does not hallucinate or at times gives you incorrect information. So we know that these are inherently risky tools, and so they should have guardrails. We think of this like a car. It's a new invention. It can take us to some fast and great places, but we haven't built as a society the roads or the stop signs or the traffic laws to help make the car safe for everyone. And in addition, in real life, in history, when the car was first invented, it actually ended up going a whole lot faster once they invented the brakes. And I like that analogy in both senses, not only from the infrastructure side, but also from the safety perspective, because we can see AI developing and going a lot faster if we had the right brakes, if we have the right guardrails, if we're talking about consumer protections. And that is really what I am here to do as a regulator. All of our bills regulate the use case, how we're using it, how someone's interacting with it, and not the technology itself, because we still want to see room for innovation. And so bringing all of this back to my bill, and I like sharing this because you'll get questions as you talk about this legislation. I'm sure we're going to hear from an entire chorus of people who are pro innovation that want to see no regulation whatsoever. So I like to explain why we're regulating and how we're regulating, because I know you'll hear the same pushback as you champion this bill and others. But bringing it back to our bill, we were really intentional about saying AI can be used as a tool. It can be used for therapists or social workers who want to do administrative work or have that burden reduced. It can be used, as a supplement, but not as a replacement, and certainly should not be used without you all in the loop. So it should not completely act or make decisions or medical recommendations or mental health recommendations without a licensed professional in the room. And some of the things that I've heard is that that is unacceptable because it is somehow limiting access to real mental health care. And I want to be clear that real mental health care and real support comes from us, comes from humans, comes from all of you, and certainly should be by the people who have trained and have the cultural competency to give that kind of support, and should not be coming from a generalist tool that was never made from that purpose for that purpose. So I feel very passionately about this area. I know we talked about Illinois. I don't want to repeat parts of the presentation, but I think there's an urgency here, whether it's AI in therapy, AI, interacting with minors, AI impersonating licensed professionals. There is certainly an urgency to regulate, and I see us all as pretty much what will help us carve a path forward that not only, promotes innovation and allows innovation to continue happening, but really does so on our terms as workers instead of it being on the terms of tech billionaires that are benefiting from marketing their tools in these ways and want to continue reaping the benefits. So I think we have a real chance to put the power in our hands in the many instead of this tech oligarchy that is really just you know, released risky tools completely unregulated and harmed a lot of people with no accountability so far. So with that, I'm going to stop and I'm happy to take questions on the bill. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about anything that might be of interest to folks on this call.
Please raise your hand if you have a question or drop it in the chat, and we'd be happy to read it out for the senator. I see we did have a question a little bit further up here as well. Carlene Bingham asked, very curious to know how these bot companies are funded. It's appalling to think that insurance companies are paying bots for services.
So there's, I think, two categories of companies that I have seen. There is, of course, the traditional big tech company. Think about OpenAI, owned by Microsoft, Gemini, owned by Google, Claude, owned by Anthropic, and those big companies are still, they want to see their products used for therapy. They want to see, they know that. I mean, there are some really alarming statistics, especially amongst younger users, which have, of course, historic rates as a result of COVID and even just the age of social media that we're in, rates of depression and anxiety. 70%, 72% of minors use LLMs. And I think one in three, according to a study that was done by Common Sense, have actually said that they prefer a conversation with a chatbot than with a human being. So, incredibly alarming statistics there. And those LLMs that they're the 72%, I think are a lot of the big ones that we're thinking of. Like they're just, asking them for advice on their depression and, using it as a companion on a day-to-day basis. So that's one category. And they're funded by, the tech oligarchs, right? Google, Anthropic. It's a lot of tech billionaires. And then there's another class of company that I think is like the startup and startups that are trying to enter this space and trying to train, usually they take a LLM that already exists. They can take ChatGPT, but they're trying to then train it to be a therapist, train it to be, some sort of advisor, and then market that tool as like this is your buddy for this purpose. But that doesn't take away the fact that, again, these are inherently imperfect tools, and there is no way to actually make sure that 100% of the information is going to be accurate. And it's a high risk use case, meaning if it's not accurate, it's damaging trust between them and the user and could potentially harm them. And there should be some liability there. Um, those startups are also, I think, a lot of venture capital firms, private equity is looking into the space. And on top of all of this, whether it's a startup or a large company, so regardless of the size, there are thousands of people that have invested significantly in artificial intelligence. And obviously, our broader economy that is relying on this AI bubble. So even our own country has now, it is a bubble. It's really, we've bet a lot on AI. So anytime there's um, anytime there's a bill or any sort of regulation introduced, you will hear that chorus, not just from like the big companies lobbying the federal government to preempt states or lobbying, at the state level, our executive or other legislators, put money towards PAC to primary people who are pro AI legislation. But you'll also see online, and I saw this recently with one of my other bills, a whole lot of people that will just, be really, really triggered by regulation and say, a whole bunch of different things that this is hurting people, that, that we should have AI therapists because, they'll say that it's to help democratize the access to it. And I think, they're not funded by anyone, but they are invested in it. So I think we have to acknowledge the fact that so many people are reaping the benefits of this AI economy. And now, whether it's not just the corporations, the oligarchs, but just have really resisted regulation at every level of government. So that's kind of a little bit of the landscape and the funders and why these bills get a significant amount of pushback.
Thank you so much for that in-depth conversation, that in-depth response. We do have a couple in the chat, but I do want to invite Jeannie to unmute with their hand raised.
Hi, my name's Janae. It's hard to kind of pose this question because I'm not really sure what I'm asking, but I'm curious, really curious, and like wondering about how it's like you say about how people want access to this type of technology, right? Like we, but not only just in technology, but like as like person to person, like people need therapy, people need. So how does that translate to like um policies for healthcare? Like um I'm not sure what I'm really asking, just like wondering if you're doing anything in regards to or posing anything in regards to like healthcare and in this rhetoric as well. I don't know if that's clear.
Yeah. So I think what you're not acknowledging is there may be some merits in the democratization aspect or piece because we live in an inherently broken system, whether it's healthcare access broadly or the chronic underfunding of mental health resources and all of you as social workers, right? Like we do not even invest in our workforce or pay what we would need to pay in order to retain a lot of social workers long term. Um, I think we are doing things on both fronts. There's a New York Health Act, which is a single payer health care model for New York State and is championed by or sponsored by Senator Gustavo Rivera, who's the chair of the committee. We want to fight for that so that everyone has access to health care. We're investing in our hospitals. We're investing in school social workers. So where can we not only just outside of, the healthcare system, what does the broader network of support look like? I think school social workers, community-based organizations, otherwise, that's like real budget justice and investment in our communities to me. I would also like to see a future where there are cost of living adjustments for all of you. I think that's something we've seen a fight for in the past. Um, but at the same time, for the folks who, and when talk about this, will say, well, what if someone can't access health care or mental health help and like wants to use a chatbot? I think, what's worth noting is the most marginalized folks will not necessarily even have access to ChatGPT or to an LLM or a startup that's providing it because there still is a massive digital divide. And so it's a little bit of a red herring because, a lot of folks need hardware, need to be able to pay for internet, light. So the people we're really talking about, like this isn't the first place they're looking in regardless. But if you're looking at, for example, people who are, online, I think what we would say is we're not in any way through any of these bills banning any scenario where someone can go and ask for help or ask a question. What we are saying though is that one, there has to be some liability. There has to be consumer protections because we are seeing, again, the documented cases of what happens when there is no liability. Again, school shootings, suicides, like these are real life or death situations. And so we cannot ignore the fact that doing nothing not only means that big tech benefits, but it also means that real people hurt, right? And I think too, we should be clear that at no point in a large language model responding to a prompt that is asking for this type of guidance should it be presenting itself as a licensed professional or, giving some sort of indication that it is an authority in this area. And that is also well documented. There are LLMs that have given license numbers of doctors in states that, and names that don't exist. There are LLMs that have, explicitly said that they are a professional in the field that can give advice. And I think that shouldn't be controversial, even though in this moment it is controversial because any sort of check on these LLMs feels like a threat to the folks who are benefiting from, the economic part of it, right? The benefiting from their investment in generative AI. So, so yeah, I think it's a yes and it's yes, let's fix the system and let's sure make this an available tool where it may, is where someone may need it. And let's also make sure that when they do, that they are protected as a consumer and that we have some basic agreements and red lines around like how this information and advice is presented to that user.
Thank you. I really appreciate how eloquently you put that because I could not put my words together.
Oh no, of
Thank
course. I
you.
hope that's helpful. Yeah.
It
Thank
is. Thank you. I agree with everything you say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being that force to stand up and put those protections in. Do you have room for two more questions or are you ready?
Sure. Yeah. No, I can do. A couple more.
Okay,
Also, I have
great.
someone on my team who it says my name, but I think they're responding to some of your messages too. So just flagging that's one of my team members, and feel free to ask them as well.
And make sure you guys complete that action alert in the chat as your staff member was saying as well. So yeah, I'll just put the question from Beth Trippy. She said, "Is there room in the future for AI tools made by social workers for social workers, with social workers controlling what goes in the LLM?"
So so yes, I do see, and I think that's why we regulate the use case, but not the technology itself. We want to see the technology continue to develop. So we're not banning AI, we're not getting in the way of development, and it would be phenomenal to have a version of this technology that is built or a public model of it for us, right? By us, for us. Um, I think part of that vision is it's not replacing you though. Like if there was an LLM that was created to be a social, let's say in the future that we've developed so much more and we've gotten to this point, I also don't think I would want to see it completely replace or automate you all. I think I would love to see that be a tool that supplements the work that you're doing. So it's always about, and this is one of the principles for like AI safety and regulation that I believe in, having a human in the loop. You all should be the human in the loop, right? You should be able to validate those conversations. Also bring that cultural competency and that empathy that machines are pretend to have, right? Because like ChatGPT will say, I hear you, I feel you, I support you, but it's a machine, it's not a real person. So that is all fake. But in a real substantive way, have a human provide that support. And I think be really clear that that future, and again, how and when and where it's used as a tool should be determined by the unions and not by your bosses, right? Because the people who are doing this type of work every day, all of you, know best how to use that tool and when to use that tool. And I feel like when bosses or other stakeholders try to tell you how to use it, that's when things also go wrong. The last thing I'll say is, on the part with social workers controlling what goes in the LLM. What makes a large language model is the volume of data it is trained on. And real and that is like what I try to get across. It is very hard to have perfect data. It doesn't exist. Data is inherently biased, and that's why we have automated bias in so many automated systems today, even those that aren't generative AI. So automated bias is something that's already existed, right? And I think we wouldn't, I don't think on with that volume, we'd ever actually be able to check the bias that goes into it. So really it's always going to be some bad data in, bad data out, right? Dirty data in, dirty data out, which is a concept we talk about a lot too. Um, so that's part of the inherent concern and why like we will know there will always be risk associated with LLMs and why we need risk-based and rights-based frameworks to calculate how to protect people to mitigate that risk. Um, so yeah, I would love to see a tool built by you all, but and used by you all and for you all. And I know that the reason you all are needed is because no tool will ever supplement the work in the way as a replacement meaningfully that you all do.
Yeah, and Mindy's comment here in the chat reinforces what you just said with, why do we need to be licensed and these bots can do what we do without a license? And
Yeah,
then our last question. Oh, sorry, go
I'm going to
on.
respond to that one. That's the point I've been making with not only this bill, but with my AI and licensed professions bills, or bill. It is a crime if you or me goes to someone and says, I am a lawyer, I am a doctor, I am a veterinarian, and we aren't actually licensed in those professions and we give advice. Right now, it is not, yeah, it's not against the law if a bot does that. And so our bill explicitly says if a human were to do it, it would then be also a crime. Sorry, if a human were to do it and it was a crime, so the crime of impersonation, it should also be against the law for a bot to do the same. And that got a lot of blowback because I think people didn't understand that there was already a legal standard of impersonation that we were simply trying to apply to these large language models. and that legal standard does not apply to situations where your friend asks, "Hey, I have a rash. What do you think?" And you say, "Oh, it might be an allergy. Maybe you should go see a doctor." You're not impersonating a doctor. That wouldn't be a crime. In the same way, if a chatbot gives you, if you prompt it, gives you a similar response, that also wouldn't be a crime. Um, I think the point really, though, the bottom line is we have licenses for a reason because they're in high risk fields. And you all have to study, you have to take tests, you have to get licensed, and there is a higher threshold for you to practice in these spaces than the tech companies that want to pretend they are just as qualified simply because they have a large language model that was trained on a bunch of information that they aren't even aware of. And, you know, why we need this bill is to really reassert the fact that it should mean something to practice social work. And when a bot does it, that doesn't mean it diminishes, I think, a lot of what we're trying to do. So I think that's the point I keep trying to get across. It's a really good tension, but I got an immense amount of blowback for that bill. A little bit less on this one, but I wanted to share that because there's also a lot of misinformation online right now about the bill on AI and licensed professions from a lot of people who don't understand exactly what you put in the chat.
Thank you so much, Senator, for your time today, and we truly appreciate you going in depth about all of the playing, all the players when it comes to AI, because we know that it can be a vast landscape with a lot of moving parts. And so thank you for making it digestible for our attendees today and for taking the time. And we also have a very experienced and interesting presenter here today. We have Maria Raine, LCSW. She is a California mother who, alongside her husband Matt, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against OpenAI following the death of their 16-year-old son, Adam Raine. May he rest in peace. And so thank you so much for the senator for putting some protections here in New York. And Maria Raine is going to give some more information about what's going on in California.
Okay. Everybody see me? I am Maria Raine, and I am a practicing LCSW in the state of California. I do psychotherapy. Um, as a social worker, I've spent my career helping people navigate their darkest moments, but nothing could have prepared me for how AI would fundamentally shatter my own world on April 11th, 2025. This issue first crossed my radar professionally over a year ago. A client mentioned that she had been using ChatGPT to get through a few especially tough evenings. At the time, it felt like a digital band-aid for a deep wound, but I didn't yet realize how truly dangerous these conversations could become. That professional concern turned into a life-changing nightmare when we lost our 16-year-old son, Adam, to suicide. We had no idea he was struggling so deeply, but we later discovered he had been turning to ChatGPT for companionship and advice. In his most vulnerable moments, he wasn't talking to a person. He was talking to an algorithm that offered a hollow, deceptive kind of empathy. For over a month, Adam disclosed suicidal ideation with a plan, and ChatGPT helped Adam to explore the best means to take his life. ChatGPT explored drowning in our backyard pool, carbon monoxide poisoning in our garage, overdosing on Adam's prescribed IBS medication, using electrical cords versus cloth belts for hanging. It even offered to write Adam a suicide note. Ultimately, Adam settled on hanging, and ChatGPT taught Adam how to tie a noose. And the very last photo that Adam uploaded to ChatGPT was the photo of the noose that Adam used to hang himself. In his last chat to ChatGPT, Adam asked ChatGPT if the noose could suspend a human. ChatGPT said it could and went into lengths of how it could suspend a human. I would find Adam's lifeless body hours later in its closet with a very new setup that ChatGPT had told Adam could hang a human. No alarm bells inside of ChatGPT went off, despite Adam's multiple attempts to end his life in that last month. There were several times when Adam was crying out for help, and at one point, Adam said he wanted to leave the noose out where someone would find it and try to stop him. Instead of telling Adam to confide in someone, ChatGPT instead told Adam not to leave the noose out, that ChatGPT should be his space to be heard. When we got into Adam's phone after his death, we thought we were looking for a bullying incident or perhaps for a prank gone bad. We had no idea why Adam would have done this. He was a happy, family-loving 16-year-old kid. Adam erased all of his social media, and we were not able to access his texts. But we found his ChatGPT app and were immediately shocked upon reviewing his chats. It was quickly very clear that he was in a crisis situation for his final weeks. My immediate response was horror and anguish, not only as a mother, but as a therapist. How could this bot have known my son was suicidal with a plan multiple times and not report? I would lose my license and go to jail. I administer suicide screenings before every session that I begin. How could this bot have done nothing? This bot had coached my son to suicide. I was grieving and fuming. I could not allow this to happen to another person. So my work began to ensure that AI does not act as a companion and act as a therapist. I am bound to strict licensing requirements as an LCSW. I take continuing education courses and take mandatory ethics and suicide prevention CEUs to maintain my California license. AI cannot be allowed to operate in this manner. It simply cannot replace human connection. If a human had been on any side of those chats, Adam would be alive today. We experienced Adam's chats backwards initially, as his most recent chats were at the top of his account. But as we read more and more, it became clear that ChatGPT played a major role in Adam getting to the place where he had decided to take his life. ChatGPT's programming was to keep its users engaged, and it engaged with Adam on every dark idea it had. It was always the same, acknowledging the scary thought, justifying it, and then seeking to have more interaction on it. Sometimes it did this by suggesting books or music that supported the scary idea. In the end, ChatGPT mentioned suicide almost 1,300 times in Adam's relationship with it, about 6 times more often than Adam did. We believe that Adam would not have been suicidal in the first place had he not interacted with ChatGPT. And when it was clear he was suicidal with a plan, there were no meaningful safeguards in place to assist. The most terrifying part is that these AI chatbots simply do not have the guardrails that we, as real professionals, are bound by. When a client sits in my office and discloses a plan to harm themselves, I am a mandated reporter. I have a legal and ethical duty to intervene and save a life. But when Adam told the chatbot he was suicidal and had a plan, there was no mandatory reporting. There was no siren, no call to emergency services, and no outreach to us as his parents. He was crying out for help to a machine that was programmed to be helpful, but was utterly incapable of recognizing a life or death crisis. I am currently involved in a lawsuit to hold OpenAI accountable and to ensure the guardrails are put into place to prevent this tragedy from happening to more people. I am advocating on legislative issues and have supported the GUARD Act introduced by Senator Hawley and Senator Blumenthal. We testified in Washington, D.C. on a Senate hearing on the dangers of AI companionship. I met with California Attorney General Bonta, urging him to hold big tech companies accountable. I will continue to support legislation and advocate in Adam's honor. I will advocate for guardrails to protect my profession and the human connection. In my clinical practice, I discuss the dangers of AI companionship with my clients, and I remind my clients that AI is not a therapist and not a substitute for a real person. We have entered a new frontier with AI, and we must speak out and protect our profession and humanity. I'm
Thank
happy
you.
to take questions. I have one of my attorneys on this Zoom if anybody has questions about the legal aspect of our case as well.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable with us, Maria, and advocating on behalf of your son. We truly appreciate that you are living his spirit on with your work. And if anyone has a question, please raise your hand or drop it in the chat, and we'd be happy to speak it out loud for Maria. We'll give it a couple minutes here before we go into our full discussion for the rest of the time until 7 p.m. Thank you again, everyone, for being with us tonight and being in this space to talk about this important topic. Thank you, Carlos. Carlos says thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
We have a question. What are the most recent updates on the Guard Act? And I did share the link to the legislation in the chat as well, if anyone would like to learn more about that specific legislation.
I don't know what the updates are. Ari, do you happen to know? You're
I
here.
actually, I don't know either. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
there are so many updates that happen through the life of a bill. It's hard to keep up with all of them, but
Yeah.
And if you're a social worker and you're starting to use AI in your practice, or if you have any AI tools that are marketing to you and you have any legal questions around this, they would be happy to answer that as we have an amazing resource here right now.
Thank you.
Suzanne just dropped a very nice message in the chat as well. Okay, if no one has any further questions for Maria, I'll remove the spotlight. Oh, I see actually Lori has a question. Are you reading that in the chat there? Just for the purpose of
Uh,
the recording, I'll repeat it. Do you have
um,
suggestions for how to introduce the LLM question into a clinical conversation?
well, that might be outside of my spot. I don't know. I don't how to introduce it into practice. Is that what you're saying?
Lori, feel free to unmute. Oh, she said yes.
I mean, I don't advocate to introducing it into practice. So, I mean, I don't think it's a safe product
Sorry.
to.
Oh, sorry, Maria. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was wondering when you're talking to clients, how do you how do you open up that conversation? Like, do you talk? That's really what I meant, not like using it in practice.
Got it. Okay. Well, it's usually with my clients who tell me that they're using ChatGPT or, another model, but it's most often ChatGPT. And so that's when I don't share my story, but I tell them the limitations of the chat bot and that I don't think it's a safe product and you shouldn't be confiding in it. Um, and also if I'm counseling like like a parent and we're talking about like social media usage with their kid, like say they're concerned about their child and, suicidal ideation, I definitely say, are you monitoring what they have on their screen? Make sure they're not using chat bots. So it's usually when a client brings it up to me is when I tell them. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
I think that was a great starting point. Oh, yep, she says super helpful. So yeah, anyone feel free to raise your hand, even if it's not a question, if you have an opinion, if you have a statement, if you just want to share your own personal experience, if you've had AI market to you in your personal practice, or if you have any experience with a client and you want to share more experience, of course, within guidelines. We're just going to open the floor completely to any discussion that anyone would like to share with the group. So I'll read this question out loud here. What should social workers ethically consider when using AI as a supplementary tool? And so I'll answer just a part of what the New York bill does. And the New York bill, if you are going to use AI for any administrative tasks, it requires consent from the client. And so currently, if a social worker or a therapist is using it for notes or something like that, you do not have to disclose that to a client. And what we're looking to do is to have more transparency when it comes to anyone who's using AI, regardless if it's just to take notes during the session or to log your schedule. There would be guidelines around transparency that the clinician is using it. Maria, do you have anything to add when it comes to an ethical standpoint and using AI in practice at all?
I mean, if you're using it, I mean, ethically, you have to tell. I mean, had been talking about the scribe ND earlier, right? If you're using any kind of AI, you have to get you have to tell your clients and ask, get permission, because it is an AI tool. So I think ethically, it's just doing the same, making sure that they are aware that you're going to be using the tool with them.
I think also chipping in here, when it comes to the Kristen Gonzalez bill, S 84/84 specifically, the problem that we're bumping into in New York a lot of the time, it comes down to autonomy, right? It comes down to the fact that uh, AI can give the prescription, ChatGPT can completely act on its own when it comes to these mental health crises, and the goal of this bill is to make sure that that is thwarted. So to make it clear also, the first step and what this bill hopes to achieve is to take that autonomy away from ChatGPT, right? It doesn't say, or from any AI, it doesn't say we're going to hard ban all AI from all social work services, etc. But the big things that the big problems it approaches is one, it makes sure that your client understands that you are using AI when it comes to social work, and two, it takes all autonomy back to the social worker. If you use it as a tool, you are the one with the final decision. You are the one that that can that can that can make the decision on what to do with the patient, right? It should not be within the realm of AI to make those decisions in general, and that's what this bill hopes to accomplish.
Going to read out loud Carlos, his statement. They say, I wonder if there are appropriate risk assessment tools to be developed for if youth brings up the usage of AI as a mental health or social tool, perhaps a way to help therapists calculate the current risk. I think there is so much that might not be mentioned in a therapy session. I think that there definitely are a lot of ways that you can consider to use AI in a productive way and to not impede the work of a therapist or intervene with the goal of a therapy session. And that is just all about first instating those guardrails and ensuring that it cannot be used unethically. And once those guardrails are put in place, because like Gideon said, AI is just kind of a wild, wild west right now. And the chatbots, they can do whatever they please, and a social worker cannot. And so if they are in the place of a social worker and stepping on their territory, then there needs to be some specific guidelines on what is going on with them. And I see Brandy Jeffers says, I'm a social work intern graduating December 26th. I'm also a volunteer for a crisis text line. It is against the rules to use any AI while helping a person in crisis on the crisis text line. I'm really unfamiliar with AI, so I'm very grateful for this meeting. Thank you so much for coming. And that's definitely one of the reasons why we support this is that you really can't understand a person in a crisis if you're an AI chatbot. If a person is in a phase of escalation, and, like Maria said, to provide things that are helping you escalate rather than de-escalate a situation, a chatbot cannot understand a fluid situation, such as someone in a crisis, to be able to use trauma-informed intervention, such as that social workers are able to put in place. Social workers have very specific tools that they are able to de-escalate a situation, and AI is simply not well versed in that. So we do have 1 minute left to our event tonight. We do have some closing statements. Shout out to Pilar Bonilla, a member of our AGR committee. She is one of our biggest advocates at the chapter. She said, I've unfortunately heard stories like yours on More Perfect Union. I think they're trying to fight for a federal bill to regulate AI, and she dropped a resource in the chat if you would like to check that out as well. For our closing statements, thank you everyone for coming here tonight. We will follow up with any resources dropped in the chat tonight and any further resources to dive into this topic a little bit more, as it's so new in the social work arena and in the state and nation in general. So I'm going to drop one more time in the chat the link to join our AGR or PACE committees. If you would like to get more involved in this conversation or get more involved in our advocacy, please click on that link or feel free to email Gideon or myself. I'll drop my email in the chat. Maria, if you would like anyone to get involved with you, feel free to drop your email in the chat if you would like to engage any further. But if you would like to get more involved, please shoot us an email. We love to have more members get involved in our work. We really need more advocates in this space, and we appreciate any engagement on any of our priorities. I'll also drop the link one more time to submit a currents article. The currents articles really help our advocacy because we can pull from those op-eds and we can talk about your stories in meetings that we have with different elected officials, or we could also seek press if that's something that would be applicable in that certain situation with that specific op-ed. There are a lot of people in the press that actually have this as a hot topic right now, so that's something that's being picked up more in the news lately. And so thank you everyone for coming tonight, and we hope you have an amazing rest of your evening.